Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kitshanu B'Mitzvotav V'Tzivanu L'Asok B'Divrei Torah. And welcome. And I'm not going to forget this morning to share the screen if it'll allow me to do that. And for some reason, I have something else here. Let me go back. Sorry, sometimes doesn't show up. So let's go here and try again. My computer is a little bit on the slow side. Probably have too many apps open. There we are. So we have actually made a lot of progress in this particular parsha, Miketz, because we have already covered the opening of the parsha, which deals with Pharaoh's dreams. We have already dealt with Joseph's meteoric rise in fortune, taken from the prison up to being second in command only to Pharaoh, and how by interpreting Pharaoh's dreams and offering a very sound policy as to how to deal with the upcoming famine. Pharaoh has put him in charge. He's second only in command to Pharaoh. And then we, of course, read about how the brothers come down to Egypt because there is a famine and they have to come down, and Egypt's the only place where you can procure food. And now they're going to the place where, as far as they know, they had sold Joseph. And so what's happening is they are looking around, even though this isn't stated explicitly. The Torah is allowing us to use our own imaginations as to how they must have felt. You can only imagine, selling your brother into slavery isn't something that you forget in a hurry. And now that they're in Egypt, they must be looking around everywhere to see if they can possibly find him. And when they actually arrive to see Joseph, whom they don't recognize, and he recognizes them, he accuses them of being spies. And of course, because they've been looking around everywhere, that particular accusation is sticking, although, of course, they're not spies. And they say to each other, right where we left off, they're telling each other this must be a punishment, that God must be judging them for what they did before. And Reuben says to them, I told you not to sin against the boy, and you didn't listen to me. This is exactly the previous sentence right in there. And he says, and now his blood is required of us. And the implication is that Reuben is not aware of this sale of Joseph. He actually thinks they killed him. So they're saying this to each other in Hebrew. They're talking Hebrew to each other. Vehem lo yadu, and they didn't realize ki shomei Yosef, that Joseph was listening and understanding what they were saying. Ki hamelitz beinotam, because there was an interpreter between them. So they didn't realize. They thought that Joseph didn't understand Hebrew because there was this interpreter who was interpreting them to Joseph. Here we are. Vehem lo yadu ki shomei Yosef. They didn't know that Joseph was listening, mevin leshonam, understanding their tongue. Uvefanav hayu midabrim, and they were speaking right in front of him. Chen. Ki hamailitz beinatam, because the interpreter was between them. Ki keshayu midabrim imo, because when they would speak to him, haya hamilitz beinehem, and there was an interpreter between them, hayodea lashon ivri, who understood Hebrew, ulashon mitzri, and also familiar both with Hebrew and with Egyptian, vahaya melitz divrehem, and he would interpret their words, le Yosef, to Joseph, v'divrei Yosef lahem, and Joseph's words to them. And that's for that reason they were convinced Yosef makir b'lashon ivri, that Joseph doesn't understand Hebrew. Melitz. So melitz, probably the first time we've actually seen this word in our study of the Torah. And so he explains, interestingly enough, Ze Menashe, that there's a tradition that it was actually Joseph's son, Manasseh, Beno, his son. So possibly because it talks about ha-melitz. Doesn't say melitz, it doesn't say an interpreter was between them. It says the interpreter. So possibly a reason why it's that way. So just to finish, make sure we've done everything here. Joseph's reaction. Vayisov me'elahem va'ayavke. And he turned away from them and he wept. He must have been so emotional. You can only imagine what emotion he must have felt at the time. Vayashuv alehem, and he returned to them. Vaydaber alehem, and he spoke to them. Vayikach me'itam et Shimon, and he took Simon from them. Vaye'esor oto lenehem, and he imprisoned him in their presence, right? In their eyes. So some details here that need some clarification. Vayisov me'alehem, he turned away from them. Nitrachek me'alehem. So what we should understand is that he distanced himself from them. Shelo giruhu bocher, so that they wouldn't see him crying, weeping. Vayevk, and he wept. Lefi sheshama, why did he weep? Because he understood, he heard, shayu mitchatim, that they regretted what they had done. They were articulating words of regret. Et Shimon, so why Shimon? And according to Bereshit Rabbah, hu ha'eshlicho labor, he was the brother who cast him into the pit. Hu she'amar leLevi, and also he was the one who said to Levi, back in the previous parsha, when Joseph was approaching the brothers, having been sent to check in on them from their father, Hine Baal HaChalamot, here is the dreamer, Halazeh Ba, who's coming here. The dream, of course, a sarcastic reference to Joseph after he told his brothers those early dreams he had. Davar Acher, another interpretation. Nitkaven Yosef la'afrido miLevi. Joseph intended to separate him from Levi. And again, what's happening here in this analysis is we're going back to previous stories and finding a relevance to seeing them as foreshadowing what's going on now. Shema yityatzu shnehem laharogoto, lest they take counsel with each other, the two of them take counsel to kill him. And remember, we know that Shimon and Levi were these violent brothers in the incident of Shechem, that basically they were the ones who instigated the whole thing. Vayesor oto lenehem, and he bound Simon up in front of them. Lo isro ela la'enehem. So he says, the careful looking at this text, why la'enehem? Why davka right in front of them? And the interpretation, the traditional interpretation is, he only bound him up before them, in their presence. Vekevan sheyatzu, and the moment they departed, he took him out, he took Simon out. Vehechilo, he gave him food. Vehishkahu, and he gave him drink. He gave him food and drink, and treated him well. So the plot is thickening. Vayitzav Yosef, and Joseph made a command. Vayimalu et kleihem, they filled up their vessels, bar with grain, ulahashiv kaspehem ish el sakom, and to return their money, each man to his sack. In other words, to give them back their money. Each individual would give back the money they brought to buy the grain. V'latet lahem tzeda laderech, and to give them food for the way, food for their journey. Vayas lahem came, and so his servant did this. They performed what Joseph told them to do.
No Rashi till 27.
Got it. Okay, onwards. So what's going on here? What is going on here is that Joseph, now encountering his brothers for a second time, wants to know whether or not they really, really regret what they did. And so he doesn't want to reveal himself to them until he himself is convinced that, in fact, they really care about what they did. It's one thing to express regret, and it's another thing not to repeat the offense. In other words, true tshuva is when you feel regret, and then you have an opportunity once again to commit the offense that you committed before, and you don't do it. When you truly do tshuva, you will not repeat what you did that got you into trouble to begin with. And that's what Joseph is doing. He is going to set them up and give them an opportunity to commit the same offense once again. Because as Rachel's son, he was the favored son. And of course, now he's not around, but there's another son of Rachel out there, and that's, of course, Benjamin. And so he's going to make it easy for the brothers, figuring that the brothers are probably just as jealous of Benjamin as they were of him. And so he's going to give them that opportunity to do the same thing, to get rid of Benjamin, going to make it real easy for them and see how they react. And then he's going to know whether or not they were sincere. So this is a very powerful element. And what's so lovely, too, is that the story doesn't tell you what I just told you. You have to figure it out. And but that's really what's going on here. It's an incredible story about tshuva, about repentance, regret, and reconciliation. And that the two go hand in hand. That we commit offenses against one another. And the question is, are we willing to really regret what we did? And are we willing to reconcile? And that's, from my perspective, from a long look at Genesis, how this book comes to an end, showing how what started with Cain and Abel can ultimately get resolved. So, onwards. Vayis'u et shivram al chamorehem, and they carried the grain shivram, we're talking about produce, whatever here, al chamorehem, on their donkeys. Vayelchu misham, and they left. So they put the sacks, the grain on their donkeys, and they took off. Vayiftach ha'echad et sakol, and one of them opened up his sack, latet mispo l'chamoro b'malon, to give provender to his donkey at the malon. Well, that's the modern Hebrew word for hotel. Maybe, I don't know that we'd call it an inn, at the inn, right? And malon is from, as Rashi's going to tell us, is from a Hebrew word lalun, which means to spend the night. There's no English equivalent for this one word, but malon is a place where you spend the night, where you rest for the night. So he had opened up his sack to give some food to his donkey at the inn. Vayar et kaspo, and he saw his money. Vahine hu befi amtachto. And in fact, it was right at the mouth of his sack. So, Vayiftach ha'echad, and one of them, the one, opened them. And so, because it says the one, right, definite article here, hu Levi, this in fact was Levi, shenishar yachid, and what they're playing on is the word echad, because he remained alone, yachid, solitary, Mishimon. He had been separated from Shimon ben Zugo, his partner in crime. Right? B'malon, And Rashi explains the word malon, b'makom shelanu balayla.
And the English word, by the way, is overnight. That
Okay.
is a verb.
Okay.
You can overnight at in Houston on your way to
It
Mexico
sounds
or something.
right. It sounds like a push of the a push as a verb, but yeah, okay. So they
I'm not sure what you're saying. You mean that you mean that it wasn't originally a verb and now it is?
Yeah, I have a feeling.
That's
But
true. That is definitely true. It didn't start off as a verb.
Sounds like an Americanism, if you want to know the truth.
But nonetheless, that's a verb now.
Yes, it is. I'm not there to argue. Okay. On the place where they overnighted that night. Okay. All right. All right. Amtachto, again, fancy words here. So Rashi's just translating the Hebrew into simpler Hebrew. Husak, it's referring to. And notice, by the way, that the English and the Hebrew words sound so similar. It is sack. It's a sack. Vayomer el Echav, and he said to his brothers, Hushav Kaspi, my money has been returned. V'gam hine be'amtachti, and in fact, it's right here in my sack. Vayetze libam v'yecherdu, and their hearts departed. They lost heart, and they trembled. Ish elachav le'or, each person saying, each man to his brother saying, Mazot asa Elohim lanu, what has God done to us? And of course, Elohim, the judgment aspect of the divine. This is, so here we go. Rashi. V'gam hine ba'amtachti, and in fact, it is here in my sack. Gam hakesef bo im hatvuah. So the money with the provender, with the produce. Ma zot asa Elohim lanu. What has God done to us? Lahavienu lilei aliva. Well, remember, Joseph has accused them of being spies, of being dishonest. And now this is happening. So it looks like they're thieves, right? They could be accused of stealing. Lahavienu lilei aliva. To bring us now with a pretext. There's now a pretext. Zo, this pretext, shelo hushav ella lehit olel alaynu, because this money clearly was just done to abuse us, to frame us. And now they're worried. Now they're really worried. Vayavo el Yaakov, and they came to Jacob, Avihem, their father, Artsa Canaan, in the land of Canaan, to the land of Canaan. Vayagidu, and they told him, it kol hakorot otam lemor, and they told them everything that happened to them, saying, see if there's any, no, okay.
Not till 34.
Got quite a bit. This is pretty straightforward here. Okay. Diber ha'ish adonai haaretz itanu kashot. The man, the Lord of the land, spoke with us harshly. Vayiten otanu, and he set us as if, or he accused us, kemiraglim et haaretz, that we were spying the land. Vanomar elav, and we said to him, Kenim anachnu, we're genuine. We're not spies. Lo hayinu meraglim, we're not spies. Shneim asar anachnu achim bnei avinu. 12, there are 12 of us, brothers, children of our father. Ha'echad einenu, one isn't around anymore. V'hakaton hayom et avinu be'eretz Canaan, and the youngest one is with our father in the land of Canaan. Vayomer eleinu ha'ish Adonai haaretz, and the man that is the Lord of the land said to us, Bezot eda, this is how I will know, ki kenim atem, that you are genuine. I'll only know this way. This is the way I'm going to know it. Achichem ha'echad hanichu tu iti, leave one of your brothers with me. Ve'et ra'avon batechem k'chu v'lechu, and the hunger of your homes take and go. So in other words, satisfy the hunger back at home. V'haviu et achichem hakaton elah, and bring your young brother, your little brother, to me. Ve'ed'a ki lo meraglim atem, and then I will know that you're not, in fact, spies. Ki chainim atam, but rather you are genuine. Ve'achichem eten lachem, and I will give you your brother. Ve'et haaretz tischaru, and you can wander around. You can go around the land wherever you want. Now, tischaru usually, a socher means a merchant, and Rashi is going to explain the use of this verb here. Ve'et haaretz tischaru. So he says, tisovavu, you can go around. You'll have free movement around the land of Egypt. V'chol lashon sochrim, and he says, all language that involves merchants, uschora, and schora would be like business, right? Selling. Al Shem, it's the reason why it's got this connection. Shem machazarim v'sovavim, because a merchant has to go around and seek out achar pragmatia for his trade. He has to go around all over in order to sell his merchandise, etc. Right. Vayhi hemerikim. So this is it. And it was that they were emptying out sakehem, their sacks. V'hine ish tzror kaspo b'sakol. And behold, and in fact, every man had his purse of his money in his sack. Vayir'u et tzrorot kaspehem, and they saw the purses of their money. Hema va'avihem, they and their father, vayir'u, and they were afraid. They were concerned. I mean, deeply concerned. So the word tzror can be understood as a bundle, right? Something tied up. And that's what Rashi says, kesher kaspo, right? The tied up, his tied up money, the money tied up. Vayomer alehem Yaakov avihem, and Jacob their father said to them. By the way, I notice how it says Yaakov avihem, their father, right? Just talking about the relationship and what was ironic about it. So Jacob their father said to them, Oti shikaltem, you have made me bereft. Yosef einenu, Joseph isn't around. V'Shimon einenu, and Shimon isn't around. Ve'et Binyamin tikachu, and you take Benjamin, alai hula, hayu hulanu, and it's going to mean annihilation for me. You're going to take all three of my children, right? So, oti shikaltem, you have made me bereft. Melamed shechashdan shema harguhu. So now the fact that he says you made me bereft, right? This implies that Jacob was suspicious that maybe they killed him, or machruhu to Yosef, or that they sold him just as they had Joseph. So Jacob, apparently, according to this interpretation, Jacob is worried that somehow and for some reason they got rid of Shimon. Shikaltem, this word Shikaltem. Let's take a look. Kol mi shebanav avudim, anyone whose children are destroyed, right, are lost. Karui shakul, he is referred to as bereft. It's a way of describing his situation. And we'll do just a little bit more. Vayomer Reuven. So Reuven, the oldest, he speaks up. And this is something that's typical of Reuben, we'll see. El aviv lemor. So he says to his father, Et shnei vanai tamit, you can kill my two sons, im lo avienu elecha, if I don't bring him back to you. Tna oto al yadi, give me responsibility for him. Literally, it means give me, put him under my hand, my control. Va'ani ashivenu elecha, and I will return him to you. Well, this is Reuben. This is the way Reuben behaves. He's got good motivations. He's got good intentions, but sadly, he overreacts. And because you can ask yourself, why would it be? I mean, it's ridiculous to think that Jacob would somehow feel happier if he both lost Benjamin and then lost his two grandsons. Why is this helpful? Now, maybe Reuben is simply, expressing, just exaggerating. But regardless, it's a strange way to approach this. And of course, we read how, let's see if there's a Rashi on this.
Nope.
No, Rashi doesn't feel a need to comment on this.
But there's one more verse for this chapter with a Rashi.
Yep, we're going to do it. Vayomer lo yere b'ni imachem. And he says, he hears Reuben saying this, and Jacob says, Lo yere b'ni imachem, my son will not go down with you. Ki achiv mate, because his brother is dead, vahu levado nishar, and he alone remains. In other words, as a child of Rachel. Ukrauhu asun b'derech, and if some tragedy occurs to him on the way, on the journey, asher telchuba, in which you are journeying, v'horadatem et sevati, you will bring down my gray hairs, biagon, in sorrow, she'ola, to Sheol. In other words, I will never get over this. I simply cannot. Don't ask me. Lo yered b'ni imachem, my son will not go down with you. And by the way, this sentence, of course, is clarifying for sure who's now the favorite son, right? He refers to Benjamin as his son, right? In this way. Lo kibel dvarav shel Reuven. He did not accept Reuben's words. Amar b'chor shoteh uzeh. He says, he thinks to himself, Jacob thinks, this guy's crazy. My firstborn, right? This firstborn is nuts. Okay. Hu omer lahamit banav. He is discussing or thinking that he's going to kill his sons. V'chi banav heim v'lo bani. But they're just his sons. They're not mine. They're not my sons too. And there is a principle that grandchildren are like grandchildren. So we'll stop right here. And please God, we will continue tomorrow. Okay. I'm going to stop the share. Okay. Any comments before I stop the recording? No. All right. Okay. Very good. So I will stop the recording, and please God, we will continue tomorrow.